Hello friends, this is Rahul Kulkarni from the Indian Scale Modeler, and this time I am proud to present you with a build of the MiG-21 of the Indian Air Force. This is built using a Zvezda kit in 1/72 scale, and this particular aircraft is depicted in a number 3 Cobra squadron. This is the Mamba color scheme. So this number 3 Cobra squadron of the Indian Air Force, it had a variety of MiG-21 aircraft, and all of these aircraft and all of the pilots who flew those aircraft had a call sign related to a snake. They were Python, Rattler, then Naga, and etc. So it's a very interesting piece of history. Coming to the build, this is built using this Zvezda kit in 1/72 scale. I painted it using camel fluid acrylics and a mix of Tamiya acrylic light blue, which is for the base color. I printed this registration number by myself. Not sure if this is the exact registration number. The most interesting part of this build was getting the small snake logo and the Cobra squadron decal on the nose of the aircraft, and I did a very slight weathering to this. I did some scratch building onto this aircraft. That is the pitot tube which you see here. I made it using a syringe, so I cut a syringe and then cut a tin aluminium foil into small tiny parts and put it on the forward portion, so that it looks like a very good quality pitot tube, because the one that came with the kit was paint up and it was not good looking. So I thought maybe I should give it a try and see, and I am happy with how it has turned out to be. Yeah, it's a beautiful kit, it's a beautiful build. I can't wait to show you the complete build process, so stay tuned and enjoy the process. A few words about the MiG-21. The media has portrayed it in a very negative light, as saying it is the flying coffin, which is not at all the case. It is a very aggressive aircraft. It has protected the sovereignty of the nation in many wars, in many battles. So I dedicate this build to the brave pilots of the Indian Air Force who keep on flying these machines and beating the adversaries after the recent conflict that we had with our very beloved neighbor. And I have full faith in the armed forces and the air forces of our nation. And thanks for protecting us. I dedicate this build to the brave men and women of the armed forces of this country. Thank you. Jai Hind, Jai Maharashtra.